your side, I'll do mine. Oh, I forgot to roll record.
And go.
Yeah. Did everybody sign their waivers?
Yeah, well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
So hello and welcome to the Audio Opinion Show, where audio people gather to share their opinions about things because that's important. That's the whole shtick. That's what we do. It's really not that big a deal, but we have fun doing it. I'm joined by a host of some of my oldest and also newest friends from various areas of the audio business. We've got some sports mixer people, and we've got some live sound reinforcement people, and we've got some broadcasting mixy people, and we've got a little bit of everything. We've even got like guys that mix marching bands. So you know, it's an all skate kind of day. I'm joined by my co-host Andy Broughton, who is the nicest Canadian ever.
I don't think so. We're all about the same.
I thought they're all nice.
Yeah.
Wait till you meet us in person.
And so without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to our polls, which I hope work off of this other computer that I'm going to try to make work. Super exciting. So we'll start with.
Can you unco-host me?
Oh, I can. Yeah, because I know you need your vote.
You need to vote.
Please,
thank you.
Oh, wait.
Oh, actually, I'm not co-hosting. So
perfect.
Don't worry about it.
I sure am glad we took time out of the show for that. All right, here we go. The most important question. I've launched the poll. And does everybody see the poll? Because it's...
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the most important question is the first question. And that question is, for those of you at home who can't see it, why do we answer a Princess Bride question every week? Why? Multiple choices are a possibility. You can select more than one. A possibility number one, to help new people understand the polling. Number two, because Brian likes to see us suffer. Number three, because it really is the most important question. And number four, Wallace Shawn. So again, in review, the possibilities are we run a question about Princess Bride every week in order to help new people understand the polling, or because Brian likes to see us suffer, or because it really is the most important question, or Wallace Shawn. Remember, you can choose more than one. And this is where I will later edit the Jeopardy music.
With all these improvements to Zoom, you still can't show the poll to the audience.
It's very weird.
Natively,
it's very
isn't
weird.
It strange?
But anyway, so we're going to end the poll because it's just not that important, and I'm going to share the results. And it looks like the winner, again, it seems like it's a very popular answer. The winner, once again, is Wallace Shawn. And I agree with that.
It's the right answer to most questions.
It is the right answer to most questions. But also because Brian likes to see us suffer is also kind of the right answer to most questions. All right, so let's actually figure out what we're actually going to talk about. Okay, so here we go.
I have a question. Who is Wallace Shawn? I don't know that name.
Inconceivable. Inconceivable. Yes, Wallace Shawn
is your friend.
Yes, Wallace Shawn is the actor who plays Vicini in yes, that guy. That
guy. Okay.
If you continue to join us, Fred, you will learn everything you ever needed to know about Princess Bride and another 57 things you did not need to know.
I suggest you just watch it
now.
It is the best movie ever.
It is the best movie ever.
What are you doing here when you could be watching it right now?
No, wait a minute. Somebody just told me that Ozark is back. I'm going to watch Ozark tonight.
Oh, yes.
Tomorrow.
All right.
Ozark is a full season. Princess Bride is 2 hours.
This is what, yeah. Two of the best hours of your life.
I got to go Ozark, so I'll see you guys later.
Nice.
We may have veered already. Let's figure out what we're actually talking about because we're not talking about Ozarks. So what are we talking about today? Let's launch that
Arrested
fabulous
Development.
poll.
That's what we're talking about.
Arrested Development. So a couple of these are repeats on purpose for those of you who've been here for 47 shows like I have. But the first one is sample rates, 48K, 96K, 192K, whatever the next one up from that is. Does this matter? Do we care? Whatever. The second thing, plugins versus the real thing. It's self-explanatory. You know, is it better with the real stuff? Some of this is coming back because of Yamaha's new VST box that they just introduced to kind of reinvigorate the conversation. Third, are changes coming in digital transport? This has a lot to do with the chip shortage right now and how that's going to affect things. Do we see changes in AES 67, movements towards it, software versions of Dante, which I didn't know was a thing until a couple days ago? And then the last but not least is what's the most important part of the signal chain? We have lots and lots of votes. I think we already know what we're going to do. Yep, we do. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And the winner for tonight is Andy Broughton's choice for the night, which is which is a good choice. And actually, Alex, when we saw that you were on here, I was like, this is going to be perfect. This is going to be right in Alex's wheelhouse. Our changes coming in digital transport, and specifically for those of you who are watching at home, we've done talks about AVB versus AES versus AS50, Hypermax, Supermax, blah, blah, blah. We've done those kinds of basic, what do we like better? But now we're talking about, because of the current silicon chip shortage, what is that? What do we think is going to happen? This is a crystal ball kind of question.
That's a silicon chip shortage, not potato chips. We still have potato chips, just by the way.
We still, thank God, we still have potato chips. So does anybody have, they would like to weigh in immediately? Otherwise, I will pick someone at random and it will probably be Andy.
And I'm not weighing in, but I have a question that kind of goes with this, which is
weighing in.
It is kind of weighing in.
And take the floor, Andy.
Thank you.
Is it a loaded question? That's the problem.
No, well, no, it's really a serious inquiry because I've never gotten a good answer to this. I have heard, yes, Dante, Brooklyn 2 chips shortage made of some, I don't know, they're made of unobtainium from what I've heard. What about the other chipsets like the Ultimo and I think Broadway is being actually phased out, at least by some manufacturers, but I don't know. It'd be nice if that were sort of part of this equation here.
Yeah, I don't see why all the chips aren't in short supply. It's all a matter of getting them from the chip foundries. Doesn't matter what the chip is. Chips are short because nobody's getting deliveries from the foundries. Doesn't matter where.
Well, there's also the fact
Cars are
that
taking them.
a manufacturer of Dante chips has stated they're no longer going to manufacture them. They were the only manufacturer of one particular type, and they're out of the business. So now they have to find somebody else to do it.
You're not speaking of Audinate. You're speaking of Audinate's manufacturer. Is that correct?
I don't know which chip it was.
Like Audinate didn't make them themselves. They had a chip manufacturer. Right.
Yeah.
Way above their pay grade.
Copy.
I learned
and go ahead, Alex.
About the chip specifically, even Ravenna manufacturers, they rely on similar chips that Audinate relies on, even though they're not the same chips necessarily. In some regards, they are. So, Pete, you're right. Everything is kind of suffering across the board to a certain extent.
Well, and then that goes to the question of can we then mimic this in software? Like, I know that obviously Dante Virtual Sound Card is a virtual software based Dante interface. Like, is this a thing that we're going to have to move in the direction of just because so many of these baseline silicon?
Before Dante happened, very similar audio over IP was happening with Telos Axia, and that didn't have any chips. That was web-based browser.
Same thing in my industry with SDI. You can put 32 channels now with SDI.
Yeah.
So who cares?
It sounds like it would weigh down the resources of the computer.
Well, does
Well, the
SDI
issue is
depend on
latency
chips though to do what it does? I mean, I know we're talking specifically that Automate has a supply chain issue, and that according to what Pete's saying, the factory that did their manufacturing is no longer doing it, which I guess is what you get when you put all your chips into one basket. But yes, I went there. But yeah, I mean, it all still requires. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with how SDI works, but there's got to be something internal hardware-wise or chipset-wise that does all that work for it. You may go in and manipulate it with the computer as far as what's going where and on which channel, but I still think there's something integral to the hardware that requires a processor that does the audio conversions.
Well, it reminds me of like
in my world, it's broadcasting. It's done with frame syncs. So the frame sync manufacturer, whoever you put the video through, generally the device, the camera, the thing that provides the video, can have maybe 8 channels of audio. Maybe generally it's only 2, but then you drop that into a frame sync and you strip off those channels and you put on your own. So now you can put up to, I think it might even go to 64. I don't know. And it's just a matter of mapping your inputs and outputs to and from frame syncs.
One of the things
you're talking about a piece of hardware that's got chips in it with directions that they have to follow. So I mean, I'm speaking unknowingly here about what I'm.
Yeah, it's a different encoding process, though. It's something that's in the video stream. It has nothing to do with IP audio.
Okay. Well,
I think the big issue here is speed, like latency, if you want to look at it a different way. I think any software solution will be very, very hard pressed to meet the speed and efficiency of a piece of silicon like that. You know, the fact that Dante can actually do latencies as low as a quarter of a millisecond, and on big networks can reliably do a millisecond, is pretty stunning. You know, the software solutions for Dante have multiple tens of milliseconds of latency in them.
Well, what are the chips that are used for AVB? I mean, AVB is an supposedly open source type of product. And also, you know, digital consoles use programmable LSI chips.
Yeah, those are FPGAs. Yeah,
FPGAs. So if Digico can make something with FPGAs, perhaps Dante can be done with FPGAs. Just sure.
I'm not sure, but I think the issue comes down to managing the networking, because that's the big deal with Dante, is it's actually networkable, and most of these other solutions that people talked about are not.
Before Dante existed, Telos Axia did all of its routing in the network switch. Okay. They had boxes that were 8 stereo channel breakouts, but that just converted the audio and from digital into analog. What did the routing is the network switches, and what does the routing in Dante is network switches. It's the routing's not done in the Brooklyn 2 chip.
No, but the management of the latency across the network is definitely done in the chip. The chip actually buffers the information stream and then times it out at the correct time so that everything is in sync.
Right.
I think that the bigger question around all of this is that for those of us who have invested heavily in Dante, or any protocol where you can have a stage box connected digitally to a console, whatever flavor that is, those are the choices right now. There's no SDI stage box, for example, even though it's a very viable, form of transport of audio. It's just not designed for a lot of the systems that the folks on this Zoom call are using, at least in my estimation. So what does that leave us? That leaves us Dante, AVB. It leaves us,
Ravenna.
Ravenna. Cobranet is gone, as far as I know, right? But there's AES 50.
Ethernet. That's dead
Did
too.
you say ether sound or did you say what?
Ether sound, yes, I'm sorry.
Ether sound is still around, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bill, don't you still have some ether sound stuff on a shelf somewhere? He's
Exactly. It's on the shelf gathering dust. I don't know. Are manufacturers even making ether sound product anymore?
And Aram has his hand up.
More importantly, I guess.
Digigram, I think still makes ether sound stuff.
Aram's got his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Aram.
Yeah, so the important distinction though with all of this is transporting a bulk of channels isn't really what made Dante good or special. Like there's a lot of things that can transport a bunch of channels down a very simple cable. Like, you know, you could do optical MADI all day long. And if you're doing point to point, rock on, that's great. Like the special sauce in that was being able to do it over basically consumer level networking equipment, which is why it proliferated so quickly. So when that's your criteria, and now that's the landscape you've created, not having a solution that does that same thing becomes a lot harder.
Right, that's a great summary. It's the networking capability of Dante that's really the killer app.
Right, except that Dante's not the only solution for networked audio.
No, it's not.
AVB is stunningly difficult to network properly unless you've got a box.
Not to sound like a broken record, but Telos Axia, 5 years before Dante existed, was networking, and there were no Brooklyn chips.
But I think that the interesting question is, sorry to be the guy, because Mac, I think you make a good point. Is this current situation an opportunity for Telos to gain a foothold in business in markets that they haven't been able to get a foothold?
It's an opportunity for somebody.
Yeah, and I this is where the crystal ball stuff comes in, but I'm really curious. It's like do we think that Telos could leverage some of this? Do we think that someone else could come in that Lava or somebody
whoever gets they need to send all the chips to somebody who's going to start making converters, RME or one of these companies who does AVB to Dante to MADI, all these different formats, and just send all the chips there so that everybody who still has Dante equipment can hook it up and change the format to something else. Go ahead, Fred.
Isn't the Telos thing over ISDN, which is now a dead format?
No.
It's over a POTS line, like a fax machine? Like the
it's over a network.
Oh, it's over a network.
It's over a network. You open a web browser that's built into one of their nodes, and you select what of the channels on your network are going to go to each port on that node. And then, it's all network routing, just like Dante, with a different user interface and no Brooklyn chips. And they don't even make it anymore. I think they've given up on Axia, but I'm sure they have some other IP protocol that their new products are using.
Yeah, same as Comrex Access or any of the other ones. I'm
sure. Lavo.
Radio stations or Lavo, yeah.
They just recently released a Liveware AS67 IP over audio driver.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same thing. It's like I'm two screening here and looking. It's like, because the Liveware protocol was also Telos's,
right,
AES67 compatible networkable audio system. And I don't know, but I'm guessing maybe that's sort of the current iteration of Axia.
It's also the original. Livewire is what ran on the old Axia nodes that were the first network device I ever used. And when I first used it, I was horrified that we were letting a show rely on a piece of Cat5 that was just the worst connector that anybody ever invented. And we were putting the entire broadcast on a piece of that wire. And I was horrified. And after using it twice, it was like, I don't want to ever use anything else.
HDMI said, hold my beer.
Yeah. You want to talk about a bad connect, but it is hilarious. Complete side note, but that we now, like, how long did we spend, especially in the live sound industry, with military grade, ludicrously over-engineered multi-pin connectors, and then we swapped it all out for freaking phone cables.
For a 5-cent
little,
connector.
little plastic, little chink with a little
Break off
tiny
tabs.
tab on it, and we're like, oh, it's fine. What
I'm
could
older
possibly
than-
go wrong?
I'm
When
older than
AT&T
most of you, and when I was a little kid, and AT&T went over from the big 4-pin connector that your phone used to plug into the wall with to that little tiny 4-pin connector with spring-loaded contacts on it. As a little kid, I said, this connector's a piece of shit and it'll never last. And here I am,
And AT&T designed that
more than 50 years later, and it's all we've got.
that connector was designed for only 50 insertions and removals in its lifetime. They never expected it to be used like this.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
no, it really is crazy to think. And I mean, oh, well, we got, this is a total rabbit trail, but it's a funny one. We've got EtherCon, which is just a freaking metal circle around the exact same piece of crap connector. Like it's we're not doing anything different.
But doesn't it
And-
give you that warm, fuzzy feeling when you
No.
plug it in?
No, because I know better. Like I know that inside of that is the same stupid, crappy little plastic connector.
Even worse,
But
because
you're
I
not-
don't.
You're not going to break off that little tab though inside of an EtherCon. That's the good thing about it.
Exactly. Someone's opened it up, broken that tab, put it back together, and now you can't get a reliable connection with it anymore.
Yeah, I was putting together my studio, and sure, well, you probably can't see it, but it's the broken tab, the infamous broken tab problem. It won't focus on that, but yeah, and I was like, oh great, so now this thing goes all the way across the room, and I have to rerun it or put another.
That's
connector on
what
it.
gaffer's tape is for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
what the tools are for. You just put another end on it. It takes 2 minutes.
Mac, I do have the original phone connector in my house. I want so badly to use it. I can't, and it's still wired into the phone lines. And I actually have an original crank phone, like a real one on my wall. I want so badly to kludge it into the phone system or to put a web phone on it or something just to make it work, because it would just be,
When I was a little kid at my grandparents' house, that's what they had. It was a candlestick phone, and you called the operator.
Yep.
It'll still.
I mean,
work
we
if
didn't
you
have that.
If you have,
We didn't have that in Connecticut, but in Kokomo, Indiana, they did.
Okay,
Still
so
a
to,
box line, it will work.
Full version of it.
so to reel this back a little bit,
No,
to the
no, we
topic.
want to talk about phone
I was gonna
crap.
say AS67. But what someone posted in the chat about if Dante was an AS67 and a new management wrapper or not. And I guess it might be true that Dante was based on an AS67 protocol. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we've all seen in our Dante devices that there's an AS67 mode. And here comes the challenge in all this. Like, Dante or Audinate has made it AS67 compatible, but if anyone has ever put a Dante device in AS67 mode and then tried to patch it to an AS67 device, it doesn't work like that without a lot of configuration on both sides. And I don't think that Audinate would ever be interested in making their devices just AS67 ready. And I don't think that we can say, let's just use AS67 now, because it's kind of an open standard as opposed to a protocol per se. And, 2
milliseconds minimum latency, right?
I'm not sure, but I think it is more latent, over a network. But the question is, can we turn our Dante devices, our Audinate devices, into AS67 devices and use existing equipment instead of buying more Dante equipment? Is this possible? Is this what we need to do? And I'm just asking questions because,
And I know exactly what you're talking about. Is like, here's another way to use our existing equipment with a slightly different protocol. Is that just as good? I don't know.
And can you can mix and match non-Dante compliant but AES67 devices, or no? I never tried to do that. Sort of.
Well,
okay.
sort of. So like an example is, in the mix engines that we use, we take Dante in, but we can also put that engine into an AES67 configuration and actually send Dante information to our engine in AES67 mode, but it takes a lot of configuration. And the problem is discovery. Dante has a really good discovery method. You put things on the network, things pop up, we can patch it, we see clocking information, we see all kinds of information. It's really easy. And then AES67 and even Ravenna, it's clunky. I mean, you're copying, pasting like 15 lines of code, pasting it to a receiver, and it sometimes works by connecting IP addresses together. It's very difficult. And if anyone is going to jump on the AES67 board or on that train, the user interface is going to have to be easy. We're going to have to figure that out before people will actually adopt this.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Alex, to that point too, is that a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, but is that, I never expected to become a network engineer on any level, even as a beginner novice, which is pretty much what I am. But I've had to do it because of Dante. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, I think. But to go beyond that and actually to put lines of code in there, like what you're saying you have to do to get this all to work, that's pushing, I think, the role of the audio engineer perhaps in a direction that I personally would not want to go in.
Well, it's almost like thinking about it in a different way. I mean, we use Ravenna specifically a lot in our workflow, and it's just kind of a thing that you get used to. Dante and Audinate, they have levels of training classes, and by we're all great at managing a Dante network. The same can be said for Ravenna after you utilize that protocol so many times, but there's different Ravenna manufacturers, and not every interface is the same. It's more kind of a Wild West situation for AES67 right now. And I think if any manufacturer is going to step up to the plate and harness, a go-between AES67, some type of singularity that all these different AES67 compatible devices can be managed through, that is going to be the winner, I think.
And I will say one word on that note, Milan. Just throwing that out there.
Well, this is what I want to know about.
End all secret
AVS,
sauce
AVB.
that makes it all confusing go away. But I don't know anything about it beyond it's.
Does anybody have much experience with AVB?
Sorry.
Does anybody have much experience with AVB to know what its latency is like? I've seen the software from L Acoustics, the Hive software, which is like Dante controller for AVB. Have not played with it. I haven't tried the AVB sound card that works automatically with Mac computers, so I don't know much about that. Has anybody had experience?
And Milan is AVB.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically.
Clive?
Yeah, a little bit. The different manufacturers have different standards of AVB, which makes things very difficult. So most things you can't.
Let's talk about Milan.
Other things, yeah. Well, Milan is kind of a coterie of top manufacturers who've set their own standards. So it's only 3 manufacturers. I think it's Meyer and L Acoustics, and I think Biamp are part of it.
No, there's more. D&B and Avid.
No,
there's at least one
Avid, as far as I know, is not yet talking Milan.
Sure they are.
I'm not sure, but certainly there's lots of other AVB products you can't plug into any of this. So I tried at the request of a client a couple of years ago to come up with an AVB networking thing that would work in their application, and half the equipment they had wouldn't talk to the other half. So we ended up
to see an AVB
Dante
course.
network.
Somebody needs to put together an AVB course. Go ahead.
I think the great thing about AVB is it's very, very fast. It's got lower latency than anything else that I know of. Fred?
I got a question. I was watching this Believe in Music thing on the NAMM thing, and recording studios are starting to use these programs where people anywhere in the world can record because they can hear themselves in perfect synchronicity. What if those manufacturers, I forget what the name of the one was that I was watching here, it's like I forgot the name of it. But
What do you mean imperfect?
so a guitar player in
synchronized?
Los Angeles can play with a bass player in
Like
New York.
Jamulus and
Played with
Sonobus
this,
and-
yeah, and those manufacturers of those software things, they're going to see this and go, well, gee, all we got to do is up our audio track count, and maybe they're going to become something.
That's been done, but you'll still never get any real decent latency. You're still talking 50 to 100 milliseconds minimum.
Yeah, I mean, it's the speed of light we're talking
watching
about.
Where the guy they did a demonstration where the guy was in New York and the woman was in London, and they said, okay, clap at the same time. And
Sonobus does that, but it's specially
off.
designed networks typically that have the high speed. Whenever anybody does it well, they've configured networks to make it work, because
all they were promoting was their program.
There's a very interesting video on, I think it's Ordinate's website, where they actually did do a cross-country link up between multiple studios. And
they pre-tested all those lines to make
it's Dante over distance, and the two ways of doing it are the one they did in England. This was in 2020, I believe. They were using an educational network, so it was a closed system of fiber from point A to point B in the British Isles.
That's not what they were promoting.
And they were using GPS clocks to time everything, and that was not for obviously the rest of us. There's another one where they did it on God, what's the term? It is a form of public internet. Let me find actually had a note on this earlier. It's called, I think it's called a point-to-point. Oh no, public fiber, which is different than regular fiber. It's actually, you can have a direct connection, I believe. I have to double check.
It's got a guaranteed QoS.
But anyway, the point is that those systems, and this is a rabbit hole we're going down, I know, those systems where you can jam with various people, and we've done tests, and if you're 500 miles away or more, if you're within 500 miles, you have a shot in the dark at doing it with the right stuff.
Jamulus, Sonobus, there's a whole bunch of programs.
Yeah,
that do this, and they
the
work
fact
for
that it takes the speed of light 13 to 14 milliseconds to get from New York to Los Angeles. That's the speed of light. It doesn't include
Sonobus
network latency.
Sonobus corrects for those latencies.
Yeah, Sonobus is something to watch, guys. You got it. Yeah, I've been playing around with this software. It is incredible.
Okay.
So, yeah, look it up, download it, check it out. Aram, you had something to say? Aram?
Yeah, a couple things. So one thing is, this is very timely because I literally spent a good chunk of the day getting AES67 Ravenna and Dante equipment on the same network to not screw each other up. And
what is it? Step one, do no harm, and then after that, see if you can actually get them to talk to each other.
Yeah,
and work.
well, yeah, because basically you have to abuse it down to, it becomes this game of multicast management because they use different clocking, and that's one of the key differences between Dante and AES67 is their time protocol versions that they implement. All of that aside, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. The question that I had, and related to us talking about AVB, is one of the restrictions that's gonna, that hinders the popularity of AVB is that the network switches that are certified for it, or it's a thing where you have to pay extra for the license. It's not quite off the shelf. It's a little more special, and a little more investment and a little higher barrier to access. And that it's just going to be something that makes it harder to adopt.
But they're still very inexpensive.
Totally,
they're not expensive. It's if you're buying a Cisco or you're buying a Yamaha Dante switches, the AVB ones are not more expensive than those. They're even cheaper than that. The one from Presonus or one of those companies, not expensive.
Yeah, and it's just we have this cruise ship of an industry where it's like, okay, cool, we have once we kind of figure out where something is, and you're kind of drifting down the channel, and now there are other courses you can take, but it'll be interesting to see what how you can push that cruise ship a different direction, and the forces that led to the forces that led to adoption of Dante becoming so widespread so quickly. If those same moments can be captured by another manufacturer, then they're in a great spot. But we can see the fact that you have a bunch of these other versions that all kind of do the same thing, but never reach that same level of popularity means, they did accomplish something pretty important. So, and there's the Milan controller, and in the Ravenna world, like I use the merging Animan for Ravenna stuff all the time, and merging audio device as the virtual driver for that, and none of it works as cleanly and as reliably as the Dante stuff does. There's always like a little hiccup, or if you actually want two different manufacturers to talk to each other, or two different whatevers, it's you're copy and pasting addresses with variables, and it just gets way sticky way quickly.
Well, as somebody said, the beautiful thing about Dante is that all the chips come from one place, and the terrible thing about Dante is that all the chips come from one place. And I think somebody started the whole conversation with that. I want to make sure that we don't miss Mike and Ed, who haven't spoken yet. Mike, do you have any opinions about audio networking?
One comment is, if you're taking these different formats and combining them, what success do you have as far as stability? It sounds like a nightmare to me. Do they become stable? And what application are you using this with?
Can you say the question again? I don't quite understand what you're asking.
When you're taking these two different formats and putting them together, it just seems like you have stability problems.
Oh, it's never a perfect scenario. Yeah, we're only doing this because if we can't get one product, perhaps there's another product we can use. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of work on our part to make that function. It's a lot easier to just use all Dante, all one system, and just have it plug and play for sure. So this is one of the reasons we don't just jump on all kinds of different formats at the same time.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
What type of applications do you use it in?
Say that again.
What type of applications do you use it in?
Networking for audio, whenever we're using equipment that transmits its audio over a network. There's these different formats, and one of the most popular ones is Dante, and we're just talking about the fact that Dante is not available.
Is it like broadcast or live or
both? Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's used everywhere for everything. It's become part of everybody's workflow.
Anywhere where you're getting audio from one point to another and using a network makes sense to do so. Or you've created a network with a console and with switches and hardware that connects the console through that network, like stage boxes, or even a remote connection going, to the other side of the country over, which I don't know that's necessarily recommended, but you can do it that way. You get into a lot of pitfalls with that, but you can basically, with the audio over IP protocol or platform, you can essentially transport audio anywhere on the planet if you need to through networking.
The big deal is that it's shareable. You can send it to multiple destinations.
So I found that device that I saw on the NAM show today. That's in the chat. It's called FarPlay.
Yeah. Ed, any thoughts?
Yeah. So Dante is, the availability of Dante right now is the problem. We all want more Dante than we can have because there just isn't enough. But the protocol, like we were talking about, it has some AES 67 capability. And if we look to the future, SMPTE 2110 is coming to be a more widely used standard. And the audio transport for SMPTE 2110 is based on AES 67. So that's really where I think we should be looking, is how, and where manufacturers should be looking is how to implement that, because it's going to be that's what we're going to be using, which also we all have to look at our networking skills, because AES67 isn't just off the shelf switches and routers. It's highly configured networks based on 10 gig backbones, and it's going to be a lot costlier moving forward. So I think we have to look at what where it's going to go eventually, especially and looking to broadcast standards makes a lot of sense, because much of our work has become very gray between what a live show is and what's a broadcast and a live stream and all that. So I just think that that's where we're going. And as far as right now, and not having chips to transport audio, I mean, look at NDI. NDI is a video protocol, but you can send multi-channel audio down NDI, and they've developed plugins for using with your DAW. So there are other ways you can transport audio across a network, especially if you made your own enclosed network. But even still, NDI works over an institutional type network, or an enterprise network, as long as you've got the right permissions and whatnot. And it uses a similar discovery as Dante. It uses MDNS. So, so there's a lot to be said. There's still a lot of options. Well, not a lot. There's more than one option. We're not totally sunk at the moment. And then, I think the question also talked about software Dante, which we haven't really touched on, but like QSYS implemented software Dante into their cores 3 years ago. So, as a licensed upgrade, but, and with limits, but with an QSYS core, you can do those conversions also with with cards or whatever to AES or, what else does it converts to AVB, I think, as well. So, there's not no options for networked audio. It's just we're gonna have to spend some money, and we're gonna have to learn some stuff, and it's gonna get more complicated, I think, before it gets any easier. But that's the learning curve. I think everything got more complicated before it got easier. Like Mac was saying before, who could look at a piece of Cat 5 and say my whole show is gonna run on that, and then once you got there, well, it's easier, So I think we'll get there. But in the short term, until this chip shortage, resolves itself, we're gonna have to adapt. I also think it's really interesting that all the like high-end level console manufacturers have moved to making their own protocols again for transport over fiber that isn't networkable, like Twin Lane and Opticore. Like, that should be a telling sign to all of us too, like that as great as Dante and Yamaha being they were like the huge adopter of Dante, and then with their flagship consoles have, they're pushing the Twin Lane, which is their fiber, and it's proprietary. So what does that say?
Well, as we talked about once before, all the things that all the people that could do whatever they want have done their own thing now. L-Acoustics,
right.
Yamaha, all these companies have gone away from Dante to do something else. So there's got to be a reason. It wasn't necessarily the money, like giving money to Audinate or other companies. It was the fact that there was something that was missing that they needed to do. And so they decided to do it themselves. And I think Yamaha especially is one of those companies that likes to have control of all the different parts of their product. They don't want to be dealing with service calls about Dante and stuff like that. They'd rather have everything within their own wheelhouse. Makes a big difference.
I know Brian had said that before too. He said, I think the way he phrased it was Yamaha has never been very good at dealing with other people's hardware. They always seem to, and Audinate, admittedly, does have its foibles. If you ask one of the guys in California in customer support for commercial audio, how many hours of their day is spent dealing with people calling about Dante issues, I'll bet they'd say it's at least 60%.
Of course.
At least 60%.
Mac, you had your hand up?
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask Ed, you were bringing up 2110. Have you seen a successful 2110 installation?
I haven't yet, no.
Because at work, we last year rebuilt our whole studio around 2110. And so far, Evertz, which is a pretty major video manufacturer who makes our router, can't figure out how to make 2110 work.
They're making 2110 work at LinkedIn's headquarters here in San Francisco. I know the engineer that designed it.
But I think that that gets to the whole core of this
We
issue.
we
It's
have
like-
a
it's like,
multi-million
you know,
dollar Evertz router that Evertz can't
Right.
make work.
Yeah, it's you know, the reason that Dante has had such a wide adoption is because for audio people, we could get the networking to work, and we didn't need 47 master's degrees to get it to happen. Lipnick.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The audio we can get to work. Audinate also has Dante for video. We've all seen that like flop. I don't know. They're still pushing it, so we'll see. But it's not as, I mean, with NDI around, I mean, why would you use, I don't know why you'd use it, especially when you can do NDI and Dante translation and bridges. So
I mean, to be fair though, there's only like 3 or 4 Dante video products that exist at the moment.
It hasn't been adopted like the audio. And that's the thing too, is Ed, you had brought up 2 standards for video that have audio, 2110 and NDI. And I don't think you'd put those in if you had an audio only system, like you're doing a live concert.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is do you think, I was going to actually ask Ed, do you think there will be a split down the road between broadcasters who have SMPTE specifications to meet, and then people who just want to do an audio network? Can we see a split going between 67 on one hand and Dante on the other?
Not if you want the lip sync to happen.
Timing. It's all about the timing, right?
Right. Well, but that goes to my point about 67, 2110, because it's basing the audio on 67. I think that's the path forward that we all have to start looking at, and like, how do we overcome the hurdles, like that Alex was talking about, how it's you have to configure and it becomes a pain. That's, I think, what we have to all start figuring out now, so that as broadcasters do, get 2110 working, we'll at least, be able to get the audio working for them too. I think that's where it's going to go. I think
a lot of it is going to end up being whoever comes up with some kind of, and unfortunately it's going to be someone who has to sink a lot of money into something they're not going to see return on. But it's controller software. It's who makes a SMPTE 2110 or AES 67 or like cross-platform matrix style controller software that doesn't suck, and handles all of this, because that's what makes it so easy, is that anyone can figure out a cross-point matrix and there's no extra configuration needed.
Have you looked at the AVB one, the one called Hive? You ever looked at
No,
that
not
one?
yet. So and that's great. That I'm saying we're going to need one that covers all of the compatible things and does all that, like manages that not manages the translation, but helps you manage the translation.
I don't know if you can play with it without an AVB device, but
yeah, I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, and I was going to ask too about, and this is for probably for you, Aram, but it's like, when you start mixing non-AES 67 stuff with AES 67 stuff, how do you clock that? Do you have to do that through a bridge? What's the master? I mean, I guess if you're staying all within AES 67 stuff, and Alex has got his hand up, maybe.
Yeah, I think Alex does more of this than I do. I avoid bridging them unless I really have to.
Okay.
But I want them to coexist on the same network without screwing each other up, which is sometimes also a difficult task.
It is super difficult because of the reason that you said earlier about Dante and AES67 fighting for multicast place. So if you were to put Dante and Ravenna, for example, on the same network, you have to filter out specific multicast addresses for Dante, and you have to utilize specific multicast addresses for Ravenna, which is very complicated. You have to get and do filters inside of a network switch, and now we're getting really deep into the sauce. What we decided to do, since we used Dante as a in and out point and Ravenna as the off-roading for going over the internet with audio, the medium is MADI. So, it's a non-networked protocol in between two networkable protocols, and MADI is potentially the uniting factor in all of this. Because MADI is not networkable. It is, and if you look at companies like DirectOut, who specialize in conversion boxes, especially MADI, they do MADI to all kinds of things. And if you put that in between all these different, protocols that we're talking about, that becomes a much easier thing to wrap your head around, especially if you like 1-to-1, 1 to 64 channels of Dante to 1 to 64 channels of MADI, and you keep it that way. So essentially everything you patch on Dante channel number 1 is going to also patch on your Ravenna channel number 1, and vice versa.
It's a really interesting, Alex, you and I think Andy were talking about this the other day, about the idea. It reminds me of patching wet comm systems together and having them run into each other, and we would have to like go to 4-wire between the two, because it's ubiquitous. Like, then it's not a problem. It's like going to something that's not really a network protocol in between, just to isolate the things apart. Erskine, I know that you were like trying to get in like 14 times, and I just also threw in a comms analogy. So are we still talking about something that you want to throw your 2 cents worth in?
Part of it. One of the things that Dante, it makes Dante so nice, just the way Apple computers are nice, is the company forces people who use it to follow their rules. In other words, you cannot get a Dante device that only does part of the technology. It has to do it all. And that's why if it says uses Dante, it's going to work together. You can connect them. You can make them talk together. That's the main thing. And that's one of the problems with AES 67 and AVB. They're all sort of open network devices. They are not managed by one specific company. Going back to the overall discussion of this night, I wanted to mention the really scary fact about chip manufacturing. In the United States, there are 10 chip manufacturers. That's it. Software, chip, transistor, whatever, 10. In China, as of last year, there were 27,000 chip manufacturers. So if China got mad at us, what if they cut off all the chips? We would be, we'd have to use analog, God forbid.
What if they released a virus?
God forbid. Well, boy, are we not going down that rabbit hole.
Exactly.
I'm literally, this is me going.
Sorry. When you said China get mad at us, I thought
we are just pulling that one right back out again. But it does, this whole, I don't think any of us could have imagined that the complicated array of things that have to happen in order to cause this fundamental chip shortage to begin with, because I've done some reading about it, and it's not just a COVID thing or this. It's a very complicated issue, and it's having all of these array of side effects.
I think COVID has brought out the fact that we depend too much on other countries. And all of these 10 manufacturers are madly trying to build new factories, but they take 2 or 3 years to build. So we're not going to have anywhere near the chip capability to satisfy the car manufacturers and the audio people and everybody else for years.
And we're a tiny industry compared to all the other players. And that's where but we're also, I think, a very nimble and intelligent industry. We got a lot of very, very smart people that work in our industry. I'm very
Speak for
curious to
yourself.
see. Very curious to see what the solutions will be for this. It's been about an hour. We could go for another 14 hours. So does anybody else have any closing thoughts? And if not, I've got a closing thought, and then we'll go to the after show,
Go
which
for it,
is more
Brian.
interesting, and no one gets to see it.
Do it.
Unless they log in and join the Zoom meeting.
Exactly. Perfect segue. So I was sitting back listening to this whole conversation, and a lot of our central problem and goes back to who's got the motivation to fix the problem. We have all of the different manufacturers who are motivated to have their protocol come out on top, because then they are in control of what happens. And this is not an audio problem. This is just a life problem that different manufacturers are going to want different things. And, in the live sound industry, we still to this day use analog splits in order to go into different people's stage boxes, because nobody can seem to figure out how to get head amp control between an Avid and a Digico to work. That's not a technical problem. That's an Avid Digico problem. They don't want their stuff to talk to anybody else's stuff. It's very simple. Yamaha doesn't, not to pick on Avid and Digico, Yamaha doesn't want their stuff everybody is motivated by their own self-interest. And we as engineers are kind of on the the front line going, can we just get everything to talk to everything else and have one place where it all talks? And who
Rocknet.
and who's Rocknet,
Yes.
and
Hey,
who's
whatever
going
happened to
to
Rocknet?
I loved Rocknet.
but then who is going to how do you monetize that? It's like, oh, I'm going to write the universal software that everything can talk to everything, but who's going to pay for it, and how is it going to be monetized? So
Andy's the best person to answer that.
Yeah. And it's a very, very, very interesting question. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up and say thanks to all the panelists for.
Fred has his hand up.
Sorry, Fred. I forgot that we even have virtual hands. Did you have a closing comment, Fred, or did you just realize that the virtual hand thing worked?
No. I was going to agree with you. I think a company like Ferrofish is going to be somebody to come up with a box that's going to be able to make all these different protocols talk to each other. So, there's going to be a player out there somewhere that's going to do it. Like you say, it's not unattainable. It's just right now it's got to be somebody that's going to be able to have to do those conversions. It's all math.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see who is going to rise to that challenge, and it very well may be like a Ferrofish or somebody that's an outside player that's not already vested in trying to get their specific thing to take over the world. That they're just going to say, fine, y'all all fight amongst each other, and I'm going to stand in the middle and interpret the things.
I'm going to start a GoFundMe and do it myself.
All right. With that, it's been a perfect hour. Thank you to all of my panelists for chatting with us for the hour. If you're watching or listening to this in sometime in the future and you would like to be involved in this, just look down in the description below the YouTube, or look down in the description below the podcast, and it will have a little address that you can send a little note to, and we'd be happy to add you to the conversation. If you have any friends that have audio opinions, and that's really all the qualifications to get on this thing is if you are into audio and you have an opinion about stuff, and if you're into audio you have an opinion about stuff. The two things go together. You're welcome to come on the show. We'd be happy to have you. I think with that we'll say goodbye and wave to our friends. And Andy, if you would, roll that fabulous bean footage. Dressed up I'll go for it. I don't get to hear a whole rest. I've been on before. So
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle.
Think it'll work?
It'll take a miracle.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It will indeed take a miracle. He's
How
still
long do
alive
I
there,
have to
Brian.
wait, Ed?